My name's Robin Greene. I teach history and classics, mostly classics, so all the ancient languages, ancient history classes, and I'm just coming up on my 10th year here at PC. I went to a school where no matter what your major was, you had to take 2 years of a language, and I really suck at spoken languages, so I enrolled in the ancient Greek class just because there was no conversational component. And so it turned out I was actually way better at that than I was at my major. So I switched majors and sort of got into it that way. It was sort of terrifying to do that, but I thought about it, and what I wanted to do was to do a speech. Basically, I designed it to try to make freshmen feel better, because I teach in Civ 101, and every year they are just like riddled with anxiety. And so I thought, okay, what would I want to hear if I was feeling like that? And so basically, the sort of, too long don't read of the speech was, everybody screws up, and that's totally normal, and it's okay. And I told them, like, in my freshman year of college, I got a C2 decent and an F. And so I think hearing that your professor, like, totally bombed their first semester might have hopefully been helpful. So I teach a whole big range from Civ, and I do the Latin and the Greek classes and Greek history. But like the ethnicity class, ancient ethnicity, which I'm teaching now, it's really sort of a response to the way that I've noticed students view the ancient world. I think we tend to pattern our own anxieties and experiences onto our study of history. And so like everybody who thinks about race and ethnicity in the ancient world tends to think along like black and white lines. And we sort of replicate our sort of racial and ethnic realities today on them. And that's crap. That's not what it was like in the ancient world at all. I mean, I'm not going to say, Romans and Greeks didn't see color. They totally saw color. But the bigotry that they might have, ethnic-based prejudices, were never based on appearance, for the most part. It wasn't based on sort of perceived biological things. It was based on other things like culture, on language. And so, and even like I was telling my students today in the class, I think there's a tendency for modern people to understand like Greeks and Romans as like, white dudes. And the Romans would have been seriously mad about that, because like we were reading today about Roman prejudice against German and French and British people. They thought these pale white people were just the stupidest, most sort of simple and barbaric people in existence. So today, the fact that we comprehend somebody from Italy as being of the same race as somebody from Sweden or Germany is completely nonsensical in the ancient world. So I try to get students to rethink the way that the history of race and ethnicity works, and to realize it's not just now that matters. It kind of goes back into my last answer. I mean, honestly, I don't think that classics has some sort of privileged position, that if you don't know Aristotle, you're somehow uneducated or barbaric yourself. I do think that studying any sort of people whose outlook is so radically different than your own is good and healthy and should be encouraged. Nothing makes you understand another culture like learning a language that at its very conceptual level makes no sense initially to students. And so it really forces you to think about different angles and different perspectives. And so for me, classics is the way that I do that. But I think that any sort of study of any people is equally valid. And it is nice to know about Plato and Aristotle. They do have bearing in our world. But I do sort of hesitate to say that, oh, you must know Plato to be an educated person. That strikes me as sort of a little snobby, a little elitist. Okay, so I was actually, you gave me these questions in advance, and I was sort of racking my brain, going, oh, what can I tell them that's interesting that's not about like a Greek verb that nobody wants to hear about? And so my last book, I work on this genre called paradoxography. And all it is ancient reports of weird stuff. Like, oh my gosh, there's this river over in Turkey that if you get into it, it changes you from a man to a woman. It's crazy. So it's just like gossip about weird stuff. But in writing the book, I discovered that there is this lake in what's modern-day Serbia that these ancient reports, like, man, there's this underwater city, and it's populated by all these mythical beings. And it seems like total bullshit. But I looked into it, and this is how like different fields don't talk to each other. But apparently, they had just discovered an entire Neolithic settlement at the bottom of this lake, so like it had been buried 10,000 years ago. But somehow the Greeks knew about it, and they created a whole myth about it. And so I kind of half discovered a lost city, which I get to say at parties, and that's about it. They gave me a job. A lot of people don't know how hard it is to get a job as a professor. Like, I tell all my students, if you want to be a professor, don't. But you don't get to pick where you live. Like, it's so incredibly competitive to get a job. I was really lucky. I actually had 2 offers. And so I had an offer here, and I had an offer in Vancouver, Canada. And I had to choose. I ultimately chose here because I really liked the department, and I liked the city. So, and the college seemed cool, but you have literally 1 day to spend on campus, and they want your answer. So it's kind of like an arranged marriage. Like, I know you for 1 day. Do I really want to stay here the rest of my life? Okay, let's see. So, but I chose well. So. When I was in grad school, my gender never came up at all. Like, it was just, I was in a program with lots of women, lots of different people, and it just seemed pretty normal. Before I came here, I was a professor at a school for just a year, so I didn't really have a chance. So I only have experience being a woman professor at PC. And your question was, were there difficulties, right? Yeah. When I started just 10 years ago, PC was very different. Like, I remember my first year, there was the first all-female Civ team, and people were shocked that it could happen. But we had, 8 all-male Civ teams, and that was never sort of remarked upon. So there was a sort of default to the masculine that existed and still exists to some degree. I have this story. I was teaching my Civ team. It was me, this was about 5 years ago, me and a slightly older woman, and then a young guy were the 3 professors. And we got an email addressed to, essentially, Dear Dr. Guy, Mrs. Slightly Older Lady, and Miss Me. And it's like, we're all doctors, sweetheart. So there's a sort of default to the male that I do think a lot of our students and faculty have. I don't think it doesn't affect me on a daily basis. It's more, it's always shocking when it does happen, and I think that's a good thing. So I'm not dealing with it every day. But yeah, I think there remain challenges at any school for being a female in academia. That's, I think, throughout America is getting better. It's just, it takes a little time. I really like teaching. Maybe it's because I have a captive audience who has to listen to me for like 75 minutes and they can't leave. But I like what I do. I think it's exciting, and I like trying to make students excited about it. And some of them are totally not excited, which is okay. But if half the class is like, yeah, I can get behind this, then I'm good. First, don't become a professor, just because, again, there's no jobs. And I think students only see the success stories. Like, behind every professor, there's 400 people who applied for that job and didn't get it. And they're doctors and have all of that. I do honestly think that getting an advanced degree is a great idea. I think it can be parlayed into a variety of careers. And I guess from my advice to women on doing this would be the same as my advice to guys. Simply know your options, develop relationships with your professors. Because we don't know you're interested unless you tell us you're interested. And once I know a student wants to do something, then I can say, okay, let's get on this. I know a guy, or here's something you can do, here's a scholarship. But I think that there's a feeling around students that you're not supposed to bug professors. And especially for things like this, yes, bug us. So don't shy away from getting an advanced degree, certainly. Don't want to be a professor, you're not going to get a job. But there's other things you can do with that. And so talk to us. I really just like us to keep going down the same path we're going on. I mean, as I said, even just from 10 years ago, we're a lot better. There remains issues. Just to give one example, when I started, counting our department, and then there's a classicist in art, there were three male professors and me when I started. And now there are 2 male professors and 3 female professors. And I get comments fairly regularly from other faculty, wow, you've got a lot of women there now. And it's like, nobody said you've got a lot of guys there now when it was 3-1, but now that it's 3-2, somehow we're overrun. And so I do think that when you picture a college professor, student or adult or whoever, when you picture a college professor, you default to the male. We picture the old dude with the jacket with the, the elbow patches. And that's not the picture I want people to default to. I don't think you have to default to a woman, but when having 3 female professors is somehow ridiculously odd compared to having 3 male professors, that bespeaks a lingering problem. So I'd like for that to slowly go away. Right here. I'm going to be sitting right here. I probably won't even get a new office. I might move the sword. I don't know. But no, I have another book I'm working on. I'd like to get that. I'd like to become a full professor. I really like my job, though. I don't want to go anywhere. My kid is 12, and he wants to come here. So I might be having like a conversation with my your age now son, but that's about it. I like PC. I don't want to leave. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch. Just to sort of give you a couple examples, I'm inspired by people in my department, like Connie Rousseau or Karen Holland. These are women who, like Connie Rousseau was the first class of women who were admitted to PC, and she stayed on eventually as a professor. But that you have to put up with a lot to be the first in anything. So I really admire them for, and they were here, in the 80s, 90s when to be a female professor at PC was really unique and not probably in a good way, So I admire them. And then also for my undergrad, there were 2 teachers who were quite old and had been the first women in their classes, like at Yale. And these women were battle axes. They didn't put up with anything. But I really respected. I felt really sort of inspired by actually working with people who had done things I'd only ever read about in history books, like being the first woman at X. So I look up to them a lot.